Joining me now, Omarosa Manigault-Newman, former Director of Communications for the Office of Public Liaison in the Trump White House. She's also a longstanding Trump associate, going back to appearances on TV's The Apprentice, and she even wrote a book about him. That was called Unhinged. Omarosa, good to see you as always, my friend. So let's talk about these headlines, the ones you're seeing and the ones I read. Do they give you a sense that Trump's campaign is imploding?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Always good to see you. I talked to a former colleague who still works with the Trump camp who told me a really weird theory, and I want to share it with you, that Donald Trump and his team have come up with this path to 270 that doesn't require him to gain any additional African-American support, which would explain why he has gone on this campaign of terror, insulting Vice President Kamala Harris, making odd comments about race and trying to be even more divisive than he has been in the past. I mean, if that is their strategy, it is a losing strategy. Going after her race was a big mistake for Donald Trump. And I just think that he's going to continue to ratchet it up because he just can't help himself, Alex.
Omarosa, I mean, you're right. That is a losing strategy. I won't ask you to name names. You may have not been given names, but clearly that's coming from someone within the campaign. And if that's true, what does it tell you about the campaign?
Well, it tells me that they know that Donald Trump is going to be Trump. Remember in our original campaign in 2016, we used to just say, let Trump be Trump. Well, this time around, if they let Trump be Trump, then they are certain to lose, and to lose, in Donald Trump's words, bigly, right? He is going to lose in such a big way if he continues to go after Vice President Harris on her race, on where she grew up, on ethnicity. These are losing strategies for him, but he does not care, nor does he have self-control. He is just filled with grievances. And it's almost why, The Apprentice was canceled, the show that I was on with Donald Trump. It's because they were tired of seeing Donald Trump. The ratings had dropped. And now Americans are tired of seeing Donald Trump. They're tired of his griping, his grievances, his grumpiness, right? And his grifting. Donald Trump is going to be canceled just the same way that The Apprentice was. This is not The Apprentice White House version. And Americans don't want more of this from Donald Trump. But he hasn't figured it out yet.
Are you kind of saying that he's naturally built to be a horrible candidate against someone like VP Harris? I mean, is it likely his worst instincts kick in and they just take over just because of who he is at his core? And if so, how do people who work for him, trying to get him to win, reconcile this?
Well, Donald Trump doesn't like to lose. And the reporting that he is losing in terms of fundraising, seeing that Vice President Harris has raised significantly more money than him in a short amount of time, that he is at least tied or even losing to her in some key battleground states. Losing brings the worst out of Donald Trump. And so what you're going to see, instead of him being disciplined and being on message, speaking to the American people about issues that are important to them. I mean, people are concerned about filling prescriptions and filling their gas tanks. And Donald Trump is trying to set up this scenario where he doesn't have to debate Vice President Kamala Harris by creating random debates that don't exist and canceling the debates that are on the schedule. That's what Donald Trump's about. There is no more novelty to him. He's just a grumpy old man.
The Harris campaign today, as you know, launched Republicans for Harris. What do you think of that effort, Omarosa? Do you think it's going to bring any Trump voters across the aisle? Do you think it will appeal to those, anyone but Trump Republicans? Could they cross the aisle?
Well, there's a group out there that we used to call the double haters, right? They hated the idea of voting for Biden, and they certainly hated the idea of voting for Trump. And then enters this dynamic candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris. That changes everything. Donald Trump's idea that he can build out his base, the mega base, is not expanding. But the fact that the Democrats are able to expand their outreach and their base, now that's a game changer. I was speaking with Scaramucci about, the former Trump officials who have completely abandoned Donald Trump, including his vice president, it's because we've all seen the light, right? And we know that he should no longer get anywhere close to the Oval Office in the White House. There is a group of people out there, these independent voters, who will listen to the message of prosperity that Vice President Harris has, and they may actually vote for her.
With regard to the debate that you mentioned, the fact that he's changing things and creating debates that aren't there, is it because he's afraid to debate her?
Yeah, it's because things have changed. I mean, since the debate where we saw President Biden have a difficult time and then it led ultimately to the ending of his candidacy, Donald now knows the consequences of a very bad debate performance. And he knows that going up against her, as much as he questions her intelligence and calls her horrible names, he knows that she would actually do quite a bit of damage if he goes toe to toe with her. And so he's going to avoid it. It's my theory that he will never, ever step on the debate stage with her because he knows that he will lose, and he will lose in a big manner.
We will see if you are right. Others have echoed the same sentiment. Omarosa, always good to see you. And again, author of the aptly titled book, Unhinged. Thank you.